Okay, Bible study. The NIV version. Luke chapter 19, verses 45 through 48. The discussion is going to be much, much longer than the Bible verses. Jesus at the temple. This is a pretty famous scene here. Then he entered the temple area and began to drive out those who were selling. This is when he flips that table in that big dramatic gesture, like they show in the movies. It is written, he said to them, my house will be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers. Every day he was teaching at the temple, but the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the leaders among the people were trying to kill him. Those are three separate groups. Yet they could not find any way to do it because all of the people hung on his word. Okay, so two separate things happening there. Understand that in the temple, and according to the belief structure and the rules set by Moses, they are exchanging the lives of animals for the sins and guilt of people. Priests are actually sacrificing animals in the temple. If you go through the Old Testament, it's got a whole thing in there. Now also, so understand that's blood money. That's where the idea of blood money came from. Because instead of sacrificing an animal, you could pay money instead to the temple. You could do it with money or you could do it with blood. If you were living in a city center, right, where you did not have access to land in order to bring your own animals, you either had to purchase animals in advance and go through and keep them, like some people did. They kept them in pens outside of their houses and stuff, where they were allowed to do that, so they did, and that's okay for certain things. And you were allowed to bring in, it's specific about what animals you're allowed to bring in. You can't bring in just anything for a sin or guilt offering. Now, if you're particularly good at catching, birds, you could have done it for free. But I'm not sure how good many people are at catching, pigeons. But go ahead and give it a shot, because it's mostly doves. Doves and pigeons are related to each other. They're like cousin birds. I'm not into that kind of science, but I know enough about the species to know those two things. I went looking. We get both here, and I wanted to be able to tell the difference, because they carry two different spirit animal messages. So I needed to know. So he's upset with them because they're monetizing on sin. Really, basically, that's what that is. And he doesn't want people, he shouldn't be monetizing on sin. Okay? Now, I know it's like we shouldn't be sacrificing animals because of other people's sin. And this is what they were told, though. So they're continuing to follow through. That's why him dying on the cross makes him the ultimate sin sacrifice. No more giving any animals in sacrifice for sin. That's what his death was supposed to bring to people. Now, as far as the guilt side goes, we still need our guilt so we know when we're out of alignment, but we do penance. We don't have to kill animals to do that. The second half here is they want to kill him. And it's like, why do they want to kill him? What the heck was their problem? All right, because one, this is a culture looking for a warrior king that, and that's not what he's bringing, right? That's not what he's talking about. Two, he's being very, adversarial with the people in charge. And when you're used to being in charge, anybody who's adversarial, what's going on in the world up to this point is what you do is you kill them. Because that's the environment they're living in. It's a very violent time, full of very violent people. And violence is commonplace. Slavery is commonplace. All of those things that we feel like are horrific about history of the world were indeed going on in this part of the world as well. So those nasty things are going on here, and there's this pressure, this additional pressure from the Romans. These are people looking for their prophet, looking for their Messiah, but they tend to kill the prophets. And he talks about it. Jesus talks about it all the time. Keeps telling them that they're people, but you're the people who kill the prophets. And they are, because there's false prophets There's the real prophets. If there's all these false prophets, how do you know the real prophets? And then apparently there's all sorts of medical conditions they would have had, just like we have in these days, but there would have been no treatments. And to them, all that stuff is demons. So you got mentally unhealthy people with God complexes running around claiming to be the prophets. And, going around claiming to be the prophet. So they're killing people because it's also all heresy. And according to the laws, what's heresy is death. That's the punishment for heresy. So, okay, they're following these things. People in power tend to want to stay in power, and they don't like people who are trying to upset the status quo. And they're being told by the Romans, because the Romans had a very particular mindset about this. They were a multi-god. They weren't a single god yet. They had not accepted, Christianity does not yet exist for them to believe in a singular god. They believe in multiple gods. And they will allow you to keep your gods unless your God does something like one of their gods, in which case you have to call your God by their name. And that has been their standard MO. But they don't want disturbances. They're trying to do long term. They want everybody to obey themselves and pay their taxes and move on. And they don't want no trouble from any of you people. And that's the attitude they have. And you can keep your religion as long as it doesn't cause us problems. So rabble-rousing and peoples and large groups and him saying things that aren't inconsistent with the teachings of Moses, and him, saying don't believe these Pharisees, it creates this tension and this problem. So it creates, of course, then an attention in him because he knows what's coming. Try to imagine knowing that you're going to your death. People completely don't understand what it is you're even trying to do, what you're there for, or this blessing that you're actually going to ultimately end up bringing them by them no longer having to sacrifice these animals or come up with the money to sacrifice these animals to be forgiven their sins. But the people in charge are actively trying to kill you, and that's what they're supposed to do. At the same time that you walk into this temple that's supposed to be about worship to your Father, which you love more than anything, and the first thing you see is people making money off of somebody else's suffering. So he had himself a little temper tantrum, and he threw over the table in the big dramatic way. Everybody has those kinds of tensions. If you're feeling today like maybe your emotions are, I should stay away from people because I'm not so pleasant today. Everybody has those days. It's okay to feel those feelings and to have those moments because we're all human. If he can have those kinds of moments, so can we.